Yeah, one of those sheets I gave you is a redacted sheet, so you shouldn't be able to see any student names, but I just got it.
We are live. Very good. Good afternoon. It is officially 3:31 on my watch, but 3:33 on our clock. So we'll go with what works. The meeting will be called to order for the curriculum committee, and it will also be streamed on MSAD11.org. So quickly go around to introduce ourselves.
Jeff Hanlon.
Tony V.
Alyssa Tracy.
Megan Carlson, Diane Potter.
And Director of Curriculum, Angela Hardy.
Thank you very much. All right, we're ready.
Okay, first agenda item is the professional learning calendar, because there's been some changes, so I just wanted to make sure we are all aware. Just making sure my tabs are queued up properly. Okay, so I'm gonna share it on the screen as well to make it a little bit easier for everyone. Okay, so because of the situation in Lewiston in October, we had 2 days of school canceled. During those 2 days, we had we would have had parent-teacher conferences during one of those days. So we needed to reschedule parent-teacher conferences, certainly. And we went back and forth with lots of ideas, and at the last full board meeting, you approved the shift to be on November 9th. So that's reflected here now under early release, November 9th, parent-teacher conferences. It was always going to be an early release. Instead, it was going to be for professional learning, because the last one we had was in early October. And so we didn't want to lose the professional learning time, so we made a request to add an early release back in, which still is not more early releases than we originally had in the calendar. It's the same number of early releases. It's just pushed into November because, of course, those 2 days in October were canceled. And so now you've approved November 20th, and we discussed the reason for Monday rather than Tuesday to ensure greater active attendance before a holiday. And it's already a disrupted week, so rather do it then than this week, which is not a disrupted week. That way we could have 5 full days of school uninterrupted, and allow parents to have 5 full days of school without a modified schedule. And next week, where there already is a modified schedule, it's still disruptive, and we recognize that, but at least it's within the same time frame that other things are disruptive. So this is the secondary view. The elementary view is the same thing, but that building-based time flips and goes from 2:15 to 3:15, okay? Because their students get released an hour later than the secondary students, okay? So then, how do we use that time? So the research indicates that for staff, the most impactful professional learning is something that is job embedded, so during their workday, continuous, and allows for immediate application to the classroom. So in the way I interpret that is we do sort of a plan, study, do, I modify the end to be reflect cycle. So the early release schedule really allows for that. The other element that the research suggests is the most impactful for professional learning for educators is choice, having some choice, because then they have a greater level of investment. Now, it is not a free-for-all choice. There's options that are based upon the district's goals and vision and the school's goals and vision. And then the choice is within those parameters based on the role that you play, okay? So these are laid out, except for I forgot to change November 9th to November 20th. And there are time slots, and we activated this right after school started. So there was time to plan for it. There's opportunity for teachers to design extensive professional learning outside of the learning themes to enhance their learning even further and gain recertification credits. So they can take something that would be 2, 4, 6, 8 to 10 hours and have like a 30-hour plan, because they can add a coaching cycle into it that's focused on what they're learning in the learning theme. There's some other elements of opportunities they can add in and make an even more comprehensive professional growth plan around something that's related to their learning theme. So that's even better. And that's even better for us as a system, because it means the teachers or the staff are engaging even more deeply in something they want to improve upon. And so then they have choice and time. And if there's a unique situation where someone doesn't feel like their needs are really being met, and it can't be individual, but a small group, they can actually propose a learning theme that's outside of these options, but it goes through a very full vetting process. So it has a lot of to design a learning theme takes a lot of work. And so that team would have to also develop a very thorough learning theme, have it be approved by the principal and approved by me and approved by the superintendent. And it can't be done halfway through the year. It's like at the beginning to follow through just like all the others. Because there are chances that there's a group that's not getting their needs met, particularly through this. So this year we have groups of teachers and they'll engage in the same learning theme every time we have an early release. And so that way they have time to learn, then try to figure out how learning is going to apply to their classroom practices or their roles within our schools. And then they usually are then thinking about what's the artifact or evidence of their learning that they're bringing back to the table at the next session. And their kind of lessons learned from it. And then they go deeper into the work and they kind of keep that going so that we're really impacting student learning through this process. So there's lots of choices this year. We have a focus on the learning environment. And we have not just the text, there's a text here with this, but many other resources we're using very specific to the environment. Managing anxiety to support inclusive, engaged classrooms and schools. So this is building off of the work of Lynn Lyons. It's actually using her text, and we actually have 2 subgroups there. One really focused on the audit, the anxiety audit, systems, structures, broad practices, and adult behaviors and practices that support students. And then the other one is anxious kids, anxious parents, 7 ways to stop the worry cycle. And so that isn't just if a teacher happens to be a parent, they can certainly take it into account, but it's also meant to them as the educator in the space working with students, ed tech or classroom teacher or social worker or whoever it is, okay? And then thinking about that family engagement thread. Engaging in civil discourse. So we did a lot of work with Joe Schmidt at the beginning of the year in 6 through 12. And so this is getting it deeper, really using his book, learning it deeply, thinking about how to employ that, and then sort of scaling it up. Tier 2 of MTSS, which is one of the hardest parts of our response to students' needs, practice, because it tends to happen with the classroom teacher, but in addition to the core instruction. So it's a skill that takes a while to learn to do efficiently. Because sometimes it takes a lot of time until you get really skilled at it. So there's a group really leaning into that.
What would you say that acronym stands for?
Yeah, sorry, multi-tiered systems of support.
Thank you.
For some of us, that used to be response to intervention or RTI. MTSS sort of makes it bigger and more global across the whole system. But tier 2 is really like core instruction, regular instruction is not working for these students. They're not really at the point where they need intensive intervention support one-on-one or in a super small group with an external specialist. And they're certainly not in a point where they need a special educator. But if they had a little bit of targeted instruction outside their regular classroom period with their classroom teacher, they can probably fill in some gaps and they'd be more ready to access their regular grade level curriculum. But that's extra planning, using data to inform their practices, thinking about what's the just-in-time learning for the units coming up. So it takes a while to like get your head around and like get efficient
Really
at
adding
it.
more work for yourself.
Yeah, sometimes, yep. Until our
But
system
Once
becomes
you
more
know how
efficient.
to, once you've
Yeah.
got it, then it becomes an asset.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so we've been learning for quite a while. So
Yeah.
this is giving people some space to really get good at this. And then they'll be able to help their
Cool.
colleagues more too. This one is helping our students become independent learners. So this one's really designed specifically for our ed tech staff, who spend a lot of time supporting learners one-on-one or in small groups. And it's pretty easy to move into like a codependent relationship. You build a really nice relationship with these kids, but what we're trying to do is build their independence and release our support over time. So this is just making sure they have all the skills and resources to do that effectively. And there's a really nice text written by Kate McLeod about this, Paraprofessionals Handbook for Support in Inclusive Classrooms. And so they're using that as one of their guides to support that practice. The grades 5 to 8 math team is working really on math standards, the progressions, the tier 2 practices, really getting into the nitty-gritty of their math learning so that they can think vertically and make sure they're being responsive to kids in a way differently than we've done in the past. Our grades 3 through 5, there's a group of teachers working on small group reading instruction. There's a whole piece of work around that. Getting really good at that. We have a middle school literacy team, really focusing on 6 through 8 writing, grammar, and academic discourse, really honing that in a grade level and a vertical way, so that we can develop those skills more impactfully with students. And then we have a K1 and 2 group, and what they're doing is we did the new report cards out this year, right? From all that work. And so now what they're doing is teasing those apart and thinking about what are kind of like the benchmarks per trimester that help us understand and that we all agree means meets. So if here's our end of year standard for kindergarten, what does it mean? What would, based on our instructional scope and sequence, if a student is on track, where are they at the end of first trimester? So we have that informally. And so what we're trying to do is under the new report card, formalize that and become really clear and calibrated around that and have it documented, and use student work to help us clarify whether we made the right decisions along the way. So that's an ongoing process, and it's getting support from me and one of our assistant principals, but it's intended to really help the full grade level team work together to really make sense of the new standards they have and what that means in terms of when they're instructing and how to market on their, so that if you go to my kindergarten classroom, but then you go to Jeff's kindergarten classroom, we have the same expectations, right? No matter the grade level. And then it's a lot of behind the scenes work and it takes a lot of time. But it makes you actually really a lot stronger as a teacher, because teacher clarity is one of the biggest impacts on student learning. And so the greater clarity we have as a team of teachers, the more effective we can become in thinking through our instructional design process.
And then you have peers you can reach out to and so forth.
And you have a professional
Yeah.
network, yep, across buildings, which is
Right,
nice.
right.
They don't get to do that very often.
Right.
Our Title I literacy team, we've been putting in a new intervention program, and it takes a lot of learning. They're doing a great job, but we really wanted to develop that, and we have some new people in Title I literacy. So we're spending a lot of time there and tying that into the science of reading. So they really understand why this program is designed this way, how it connects to the science of reading, and then what are they seeing as they're implementing it, and what kind of questions is that raising, or what kind of celebrations does that create? We've actually had a fair amount of celebration. It's been really exciting. And then the library team, I forgot to put theirs in. They have a very extensive proposal for what they're doing around curriculum, mostly around our digital citizenship work. So those are our learning themes. So when we are saying we're reclaiming our early release that was canceled, it's not just for teachers to work in classrooms and plan for the week after vacation, right? It is intentionally designed, very strategic. If they didn't have this time on Monday next week, they don't get it again until February. Because the early release on December 21st is for a different purpose. And so I can't claim that for this. And so that's a really long time from October to February to go on something that you're supposed to be doing, like routine learn, apply, reflect, learn, apply, reflect. Like it's less impactful if we don't have this date. Does that make sense? Do you have questions?
Do people sign up so you know who's going to what?
Yep.
And then you have.
Is this slideshow available?
Yeah, I have a printout right here, and I can send you the link to this.
I mean, online is fine.
Yeah, I can send you the link, John.
Okay.
This, see where it's yellow? So they had to complete a Google form
Yeah.
in September, indicating which learning theme they wanted to be in. And that gave us time as facilitators to figure out, okay, who's in the room,
Right,
who forgot to sign up,
right, right.
you know, and have the principals check in with them and help them remember to go sign up. And it made us be able to tailor some of the sessions based on who was going to be in those rooms.
That's great.
So this is the second year we've done learning themes. It's different themes usually, and it's based upon need, goals, and feedback.
Very good.
Okay.
Thank you for that.
Does that help?
Yeah, very helpful.
Okay, because I know it was just like 30 seconds in the last board meeting, and I was
Yeah.
like, ooh, that
I remembered the sheets
that could
and I
cause some
was,
questions.
so I wanted people to remember, yeah.
What is the name of Joe Schmidt's book?
Civil discourse,
okay.
actually, the big title is civil discourse. There's like a subtitle,
Uh-huh.
but you'll
Probably
find it.
find it.
Yeah, it's great. He lives nearby.
Really?
Local. Okay, so no more questions on that one?
No, I think that was great, but I think it was really good to explain in that
Right.
detail. It's gonna make a difference, I think, if anybody asks,
Well,
because
and
it
now you'll
seems
know.
like the perfect, like the same way we moved parent-teacher conferences, pretty much just move it the same, just like swap date, let's just move the day,
Yeah.
you know, and I think it's gonna work out, so. I
And
think-
it's hard because it would have been just nicer if everything stayed the way it was supposed to stay, but we
Right.
don't get to control the world or people's actions
That's
apparently,
right.
so.
Yes.
So we're trying to make do with what was dealt. Okay, the next one, I don't have a presentation, but I just have I wanted to revisit this quickly and talk it through. I have notes here from
Good,
Mr.
thank
Walker.
you. Yep.
Okay. So I just want to first talk about why it's on the agenda. So it says, it's my long, you know me, I'm long-winded. So student enrollment, interest in pep band, the implications on programming and instruction. In other words, why are we not seeing the band places?
I'm
Okay,
hearing it all the time.
yeah, so I wanna, there's really thoughtful reasons, okay? And I wanna kind of get ahead of it. Because we're moving from football season to basketball season, right? And then people are gonna be like, why is the band not sitting in the stands? So I kind of want to talk through this. So David Walker and I have met a number of times about this. Pat's met with us too. We were meeting over the summer, so this is not just like, an all of a sudden decision. Couple of things, I have all kinds of notes, so I'm gonna try to put it in order for you. So think about questions, think about things I might be missing. A couple of things are going on in our performing arts, well, let's specifically our music band world, okay? One is since COVID, a lot of our numbers are dropping they were sort of like stable, then COVID hit and we actually maintained music and band through COVID. It was amazing. We bought these special things
Oh,
that
yeah,
went
that's
over.
right. I
Remember,
forgot that.
special
Covers,
covers,
yeah.
David
Yep.
would be better at this, but
Yeah, I
he,
know what you mean. Yeah.
David Walker would be sitting here with us tonight, just so you know, but he's auditioning students for the musical.
Yeah, right
Oh,
now, the
great.
day,
At this
second
moment.
day.
That's
Yeah.
great.
Second
Yeah,
day.
so he can't do both things at once. So I'm gonna do my
I'm
best.
glad you're doing that.
So that kind of happened, but we've committed to maintaining the program, right? So we're still full staff. We have an active and engaged program from grades 5 through 12. And 5 is that entry point, but what we're noticing, even in 5th grade, this year in 5th grade, we have fewer students than we've had in the past. And 5th grade's our entry year, and everyone loves Adam Newton. I mean, like, the kids adore him as a teacher. So, you know, it's not a personality thing or anything. It's just kids are shifting their interests. And we're going to continue to try to lean into opportunities for students to see others performing, so they might re-engage. But our numbers in 5th grade are much lower than they have been in the past. Our numbers in 8th grade last year were really healthy. We had a really healthy group. It dropped by 2/3 by the time they got to 9th grade and entered band.
Mm.
Yep. So
This is just recently,
just this
this
fall.
last year?
Yep, in 8th, and I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, but it's something like in 8th grade, we almost had 30 kids, and as they moved into 9th grade this fall, we have like almost 10.
Like a handful, yeah.
It's like a third of the students
Yeah.
continued to go into band this coming year in fall of 9th grade.
Mhm.
So of course,
Yeah.
why, right?
Yeah.
We wanna know why. So we did all kinds of surveying of students, student to student, like student leaders to students, and then teacher to students. We have good relationships with our kids, that doesn't seem to be the issue. So it's not, again, it does not look like it's an adult student issue. What we're hearing, is one of the issues, honestly, is the band program of studies, the course for band requires you to both do the 2 concerts per year, the winter and spring concert per year, and requires you to be in pep band. And 2/3 of our students said, no, thank you, because they don't want to be in pep band, not because they don't want to be in band. But they're tied up, because we've always said the band is the band is the band. So when you're in the band, you're performing at parades, or you're performing in the school events and activities, and you're performing in the evening concerts, which are 2 per year. Students collectively are saying, yeah, I'm out.
For the events.
I will do the 2 formal concerts. I've always done that, right? And from kindergarten through 8th grade, we have students across the board do music and band or chorus, right? And every school produces these concerts, and then sometimes they all happen at the high school. But the kids are like, I have other things I want to do. They want to be in other activities. They want to be with their friends and not in the band during the games. This is what's reported to us, and we have like it all, I don't have the document, but we have it all documented. They want to have some flexibility, or they actually just don't want to go out.
Yeah.
So, they have other entertainment. So that's been a little bit disappointing, and someone like David Walker, who's all in and like committed to this program and these kids, it's disappointing, it's sad. But he also recognizes that like, that's not an area he has a lot of influence over, right? And so we've gone back and forth a lot about, well, if we wanna increase band participation, because at least if you're in the band, then you may change your mind and join pep band. But if you're not in the band and you haven't been practicing routinely, joining pep band is probably
Yeah,
a real
that's a big
stretch.
step, yeah.
So you're going to see a request in January when we do the program of studies review, which is what we do every year in January or February, but this year, January. You're going to see a request to separate band and pep band, to have band be something students do in the 2 required concerts. And we're still playing with it. It's a draft form, so this may change by the time January comes around. Consider pep band to be a club. So that we can start getting a core group of students with a diverse range of instruments. There are some students who do want to do the pep band.
Yeah, I bet.
Absolutely, and they were advocates for it.
Mhm.
So here's the challenge with pep band. You also can't just have a small number of students
Mm.
or a number of students with similar instruments.
Right.
Because then all of a sudden you don't have okay.
The
this
one
is
other
percussion,
brass, yeah,
or you don't have
percussion,
brass, or you
They
don't
can
have,
make it happen.
you know, and
drums,
Or
whatever.
creative orchestrating.
yes, but a mass of students is helpful,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
The other thing we've learned is that some of our students coming up through the program, while they have interest, they're still kind of developing their depth in their skills. It felt like they had a couple of years where they were still practicing, but it wasn't to the intensity and the frequency that you really need to get that maturity in presentation. And so they're committed, but they don't have like that developed presentation. Like they can get to it for a winter concert with a set, and they can get to it for a spring concert and a set, but they're not quite at that level where they're like, we can do this routinely in a pep band and have enough diversity of music to work with. So David's like, maybe I could get a small core group, but we'd be able to do probably like 4 songs over and over and over and over and over. And then, so that's sort of a problem too. What are my other notes? And then there was a very specific question that came through recently about the winter December parade. I think it's called the Festival of Lights
Mhm.
Parade. And like 20 years ago and 30 years ago, we had our band, our pep band or band actively walking that parade route all the time. So some of the things that came up is specifically that parade is very cold. The valves on the I'm gonna read this because I can't speak to it very well. The valves on the brass instruments would constantly freeze if the students stopped playing even for a little bit. We got to the end of the parade, a significant number of instruments had frozen up. The keys on the woodwind instruments would also bind up and get sluggish in the cold. It was difficult preparing music for the parade and getting students outdoors the middle and end of November to practice for the parade, because they didn't want to just have them do it for the first time during the parade. I just said that. Getting students to come out on a Saturday was difficult. And then David references this year specifically due to some of the dynamics around this year's ensemble, which is the fact that it's not quite enough kids to be a true ensemble. We aren't really in a position to do a parade, even if it was warmer, and all those other factors worked out. Says, my focus has always, for all these years, have been that is to do what's right for my students and for the ensembles, and to always put them in positions where they will always be successful. And so that is a concern of his. Like, he doesn't want to show up and have it be such a skeletal experience that people are basically gonna say, oh, that's nothing special.
Yeah.
It's part of the reputation of the district, and that would hurt the students who would hear that, because they will hear it. So we kind of have all these like factors that have come up, some that we can shift some of our decisions to maybe influence greater engagement. And we have some factors that are a little bit out of our control, based on the current societal norms and whatever else is going on. It's not that we aren't trying. We have a very active program at the middle school and some great collaboration happening with Rick and Adam and David to try to like really keep that program ignited and innovative, which hopefully will allow for enough depth that as they come up into the high school with a few shifts maybe in how we program at the high school, that there's even more continued interest and engagement. We've said things to kids like, it'll look great on your resume, it'll look great for your college applications. They don't care, except for the few that are already committed,
I
right?
appreciate your presentation and feedback on this, because I think what I personally to share have heard at athletic events is, well, he didn't want to do it, or and I want to be very clear,
Yeah,
that it
it's not
wasn't
that.
Mr. Walker, and he's done this for years, and I know that even not growing up here. And so I don't know if it's that, like you said, I mean, I have kids, they all decide something and you kind of go with it. So if nobody told anyone and then this happens, I mean, it's unfortunate when people say things and they don't have the information. So I think it's a good approach, and I applaud him for offering, what he knows, and
Yeah.
surveying the students was probably the best idea, to be honest, yeah. So,
And I will say, like, is the pep band dependent on David Walker running it? Historically, David Walker has always run the pep band. He's very good at it.
mhm,
And there is going to be a time when David Walker is not in a position
Right.
personally or professionally to
Right.
want to do that.
Right.
But what I can say is we have a really brilliant music staff.
mhm,
And depending on how we decide to operate the pep band in the future, if we can get it reconfigured, we have other people who may be able to assume that if for some reason, David Walker was the person who couldn't. We have other people in our K-12 program who have the skill set to do that. It has not been entertained because this year it's not about him. It's about the student challenge,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And
But there's more kids in band in middle school still, so maybe we can like hope that
it could change it.
it will change.
There's
or-
always an ebb and flow in programming,
I-
any kind of programming, and performing arts is not an exception.
If you have kids in a club though, I bet other kids will see him in the parade and be like, oh, hey.
Yeah,
I
and
do wanna do that.
it's right now it's draft, cause like as with anything, there's like lots of if thans.
Yeah,
And we have to work
totally.
those out, and I don't have enough foresight when it comes to that particular thing. I'd have to really work with the performing arts team to make sure we think of all the if thans to create a thoughtful proposal.
Well, and I think laying it out as separate programs, because I didn't know that either. That's why I asked you the question initially. I didn't
Yeah.
realize it was all connected. I'm also learning about all the District 3 things and what
Oh,
that does, because we
gosh,
did that for chorus and you do that for band, and those are all things that you do.
We
So
still do a lot of those.
there's a lot of those too, right? And so I see kids doing that. And so then your head thinks, well, why aren't they doing this too? Well, they just don't want to. I mean, you're not gonna change their mind, right? So, yeah.
Maybe we'll just have to have some wonderful horn players come to Johnson Hall and
You never know.
I'm sure our new opera house is going to make
There
everybody
you
in
go.
Gardner want to be a musician.
Right.
Did you have a
Good call.
question,
I was
Joy?
gonna ask, do we have a drum line?
I understand what a drum
No, I
is.
don't think necessarily. If we don't have the ensemble, I don't know that we necessarily do. I grew up in a school where I know what you're saying, right? We had
Right.
kids that like followed
Yeah.
that path. They did it the whole time.
Fun.
I have a brother-in-law who's a music director, so I've lived it a little
Thank you.
through that.
I was like,
But I don't think we have as many kids, like we probably have a handful at the high school or at the end of middle school last year, because my daughter's in the cohort you're talking about. There was a lot of kids with a variety, but they all do a couple of instruments, not like drums and, percussion
Yeah.
and flutes and all that. It's like,
we do feel
Yeah.
students do change. So we do have a number of students who are learning drum
yeah,
in 5th grade. But sometimes somewhere in the middle school, they change it up. Like,
Right.
it doesn't mean they're committed all the way through.
so I haven't seen
We
a
don't-
traditional drum line,
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's a few marching bands in the state, a pretty healthy handful, but we don't have that here. We don't have the capacity.
My husband was in
And,
the marching band, also David Walker.
Yeah.
We kind of ran into some of that problem in New Jersey, and we had a pretty good band program. And then what they did is they switched it up a little bit and they included other instruments. So guitar and
Yeah.
keyboards.
It's
And
simple.
that kind of stuff can be done like off the back of a truck with a couple of horns as well. And you might be able to get more people involved because you might have more kids that are very interested in guitar or bass or keyboards, and they're not so interested in playing, you know, trumpet or
Classical.
tuba.
Which,
or
by the way, we
whatever.
have a guitar club now.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah.
We just talked about that at the last
Yeah.
meeting, so that could be one of the,
Yeah, the
Yeah,
guitar.
and
Yeah,
I
I-
like.
Our
Yeah.
performing arts team's pretty
Details.
creative and they'll hear this presentation, so I'll make sure they get that information
Yeah.
too. And we do have a new person at the middle school to us this year, but not to performing art, not to music. And so, they're working really nicely together and I know they'll be thinking creatively about this and you'll see more as the program of studies comes forward. Yeah, thank you though, it's helpful.
yeah, I'm glad to share it so that we can squash any concerns or,
Yeah, that's-
naysay about what's actually happening.
So interesting,
Yeah.
though, about that drop off. I wonder if it's like
Hmm.
that certain group, that
Or
certain
some of them
age
did
has some sort
volleyball,
of.
some did drama, some of them are working, quite honestly. It's a
Yeah.
weird, because you wouldn't think as freshmen they'd be doing all that.
Right.
But they seem to have done that. They like disperse.
But it's kind of like, did they miss the experiences of like the parade and things like that because of COVID? So it's not
So
important to
maybe
them
It could be.
because,
That's a fair point.
I have
You know,
no
like-
idea.
The last two
Yeah.
years, they didn't.
Yeah,
because we,
yeah.
I remember when the kids were super little, the marching band is a super exciting part of the parade. So then not having that experience, they're like, why would I be in the marching
Right,
band?
and
Why
somebody's
would I-" Yeah.
mentioning it like, hey, we're missing it.
But
Yeah.
it is a wonderful, wonderful, my husband was in the marching band program with Mr. Walker, and I'm forever grateful because I think he made a really cute marching band guy and a husband.
Yeah.
Does it have anything to do with their glued to TikTok or something?
I
like that?
probably, I
That's
don't know,
Probably,
yeah.
Diane, correct.
Video gaming is
Yeah.
a big.
But they all, staying in, I feel like just staying inside for those 2 years in general has made
Uh-huh.
everybody
Yeah.
kind of reassess what they're spending their time on and where they are and
Absolutely, yeah.
just is shaking out weird.
Especially if we're hearing that the general interest in being in the two concerts is there, so that
Right.
that
Still some
Right.
performing.
That-
Yeah,
Right.
level of interest is there, it's sort of like not the pep piece,
right.
and so that, yeah.
We're just still have to get over our lack of pep.
Yeah.
We have to like we have to like reignite the pep.
Yes.
We have to like bring
That is
the
the
pep.
best quote of the meeting today. We need to re-engage the pep.
We do. We just kind of lost it for a little, you know.
Okay, now the most exciting part of the meeting.
Yes, data.
Yeah.
So actually, let's be clear, next month will be the most
I'm
exciting.
such a nerd.
This year, so I had to break this up because there's a lot new happening in the state testing world.
Right.
So to keep my sanity and because of this timeline that the state is releasing, which I'm gonna share with you. This session is specifically orientation to how the data set will come forward and be
Gotcha.
formatted.
Yep.
Sort of the timelines, because this is all new, this is gonna look new to you.
Yeah, it does. It's different.
And then hopefully, because everything's supposed to be fully released December 6th, we took the test in October.
Okay.
December 6th, then
Yep.
I will hopefully have that 1 week to prepare to get you a data meeting. Part of our December meeting will be data. I have a couple policies I have to bring forth as well. I haven't talked to you about that yet,
Okay,
sorry.
yeah, no worries.
And then January, we'll do a little bit more with the full board.
What we,
Okay.
yeah.
Which
that
is
makes
when
sense.
we'll be doing our mid-year assessments. So
we'll
our
start
timing this
over.
year is a little off, but it's not in my control, so.
Yeah,
This is what it looks like it goes in the report cards. Does this?
But you
something
won't
like
see them
this?
yet.
Yeah, oh, I know,
Normally,
but
yeah.
does this?
Yep,
this is
so
what you're
we're gonna
right,
talk.
okay.
Okay, state testing. I'm gonna do my very best to be as
Right.
concise as possible and give you time for questions in 20 minutes. We have always used NUIA, Northwest Evaluation Association, map growth here. Well, not always, but like, I think we're on year 18 now. It's a long time. And the years that we've used it is a little bit different, but mostly K-8. Then we moved it into Then the state decided we were going to use NUIA map growth as a state assessment right after COVID. And they were gonna do that in 11th grade, so the third year in high school. So then we added map growth in 9th and 10th grade, so we had a K to 11 testing window. Map growth is ELA or literacy and math. Those are the two testing areas. Then the state decided after a year of MAP growth, they were gonna contract with NUIA for something specific called the NUIA through year, it's not up there, but through year assessment, which I'm going to show you what that actually is. The reason for doing that is very legit. The MAP growth assessment did not meet all the federal requirements for annual state testing in grades 3 through 8 and high school. It was missing a couple elements that are required by the federal government for state testing. The SAT at the high school level was not missing it, but they had already released that years ago, okay? So they found that NUIA has a through year assessment. They're only using it in 3 or 4 states now, we're one of them. And it meets the federal requirements. So that's where we're at. It started last spring. That was sort of their implementation, which is a little odd because it's really supposed to be about growth. And we started it in the spring, but it's probably good. It gave us a lot of practice. And then it's required in the fall and the spring. And that way we have a growth profile of a student from beginning of year to end of year.
What was the acronym? NUIA?
Northwest Evaluation Association.
Okay.
And it was a nonprofit. It is now owned by Pearson, I think.
Yeah, because they've been hiring like.
One of the
gangbusters,
big
too.
companies, just
Big.
recently bought it.
Yeah.
Used to build sailboats.
Really?
Pearson. Not the same company.
Oh, same name though. Okay, so, given that this test format is fairly new, the data isn't available right away. So in the past, when we've given NUIA MAP growth, which we still do in kindergarten, first grade, second grade, and ninth grade at times, at certain times of the year, not kindergarten until the end of the year, or maybe not at all, first grade later in the year. You would get the data immediately at all levels, okay? But we now have to roster all of our NUIA, all of our students through a state portal. Safe and secure and all that stuff. But, and it's the same portal we use for uploading all of our attendance data, all the stuff, it's something like that. Like all the stuff we already enter our student data into, but it gets rostered there and we roster through another NUIA portal. So Terry's brilliant, it's great work. And as a result of that rostering process, the state opens and closes the window for testing, which is larger than the window we need for testing. So we test within 2 or 3 weeks, and the state has like a 6-week window. When they close that window, then NUIA has to double check all the data. The state has to double check all the data, and then they release it to us. So it's a much slower process than it has been in the past.
What do they have to do to double check?
Some students get rostered, and even though we code them to say they're taking the alternate assessment,
Oh,
they still somehow show up and it will skew your numbers if they don't go in and hand delete them or something like
Oh.
that. Or a kid moves and we've released them, the other school has picked them up, but for some reason in the state assessment system, the kid didn't move, it stayed in one school instead of the other district.
oh.
And the state will catch, there'll be a flag and they have to like move it, technically move the child.
Right.
So that the data is showing up in the right place. So
Oh,
it's
wow.
like technical stuff
Yeah,
that
yeah,
I
yeah,
would not
yeah.
wanna be doing.
Deduplication and move it.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Stuff like that.
So,
Absolutely.
so that's a big change. So our spring data was supposed to be available in late August. It was early September. Our fall data, but because that was the first time going through and we double tested this past spring, I didn't wanna do a whole board report on that. One, I was still learning what the data all meant.
Right.
And 2, I thought the fall data would be more accurate for us because now it's only the single test. And we'll use the spring to compare spring to spring. So it'll still be valuable. And it wasn't a choice, we had to take it. Okay, so what am I doing wrong? There we go. Just for your knowledge, the state test is grades 3 through 8, and now it's the second year of high school, so 10th grade, because too many tests were happening in 11th grade. So that's what the state was able to make that change. They test in math and reading. These are the approximate number of questions they're exposed to. And there's a recommended time, but it is not a time test. Kids, any child, no matter who they are, can take longer than 60 minutes, and there's no penalty, okay? It is an adaptive test. This is my best way to take something from the department to show it to you. NUI has always been an adaptive test, that's the power of it. So basically, a student answers a question correct, it goes up a little bit harder to see how they're doing. Then they answer correct again, it goes a little bit harder in each of the strands. In literary, information, or vocabulary, or in algebra, geometry, whatever. And if they answer a question incorrectly, it drops it a little bit. The students don't know that. They have no idea if they're answering correctly or incorrectly. They don't really notice the difference in the questions. But it sort of kind of basically calibrates their understanding. And of course, with that, there's a standard error. Now if you really want to understand the standard error, I have a paragraph here I can read to you. I don't have it memorized yet. I'm still learning statistics to the degree to understand this constraint-based engine, okay? But I can, if someone needs to know, I have it right here.
No.
So you can see the standard error can be pretty wide or pretty narrow, and it's wide at the beginning, and then as they move through the test, it gets tighter, right? So then that results in a score. So that's why it's adaptive, whereas probably tests you took in school, if you had them, one, you were filling in little circles on a piece of paper instead of on a computer screen, and it was fed through some electronic machine, you know, or a human was looking at it, and it was right or wrong, right?
And no other.
And so this is different. There's a bank of questions and it kind of works through that.
You got the SATs right like that.
Yeah, so the NUIA map growth, like our K-1-2 students, or like we all used to take, is the top row. You take a fall test, it's adaptive, so it kind of gets us into this place. It's not based on grade level. It has wide adaptivity. So if a student is in 4th grade, but they're really answering 1st grade level questions, it'll get them to those questions and calibrate it. Likewise, the other way, if they're in 4th grade and they're like doing super well, they're gonna keep giving them harder questions, and it may result in a RIT score that's equivalent to a 7th grade student, okay? That's why it's wide adaptivity. That's fall. In the winter, it's always an optional test. We tend to do that here. It's the same experience. And in the spring, it's the same experience. And we use that data set to kind of understand both instructionally, how did this work for this child? And then I use it broadly, looking for trends, understanding if our curriculum is actually producing the results we're seeing or not. You know, there's all kinds of ways to look at it broadly. The difference with the through year is in the fall, the kids are experiencing the same thing basically that they've always experienced, and the winter. But in the spring, they have more questions. And that's because some of them are diagnostic, like they always have, to produce the RIT score. And some of them are from a third of them are from another bank that they call the summative bank. And those responses are not widely adaptive. They're only adaptive within the one grade level of the grade level the student is registered in. So if it's a 6th grade student and the computer knows it's a 6th grade student, they're gonna draw questions from 5th, 6th, and 7th grade only that are designed specifically for that portion of the exam. And based on their responses, it's going to create a different score called a scaled score. And that summative piece, that's the part that was missing on the federal requirements.
Got it.
Okay? You had to have, and there's 2 reasons for that. You had to have a summative score. The RIT score, the top row, that is norm referenced. Okay, so that is, how did the students do in comparison to all other students in their grade level across the nation? And I'm gonna show you examples. Kind of if you think like the old bell curve, right? Then the summative part is criterion referenced. So it's taken all the grade level standards and it's organized them in a continuum of this is the standard, this is if you exceeded it, this is cognitively demanding if you're partially there and not there. And the questions are designed around each of those 4 categories at that standard. And they answer these questions, that's why it's only within 1 grade level, and they get a score based on that. And that score is based on their responses to grade level standards only, not to their peers, not to how they compared within their peer group, only to how they compared against the expectations of the standard. So it needed a criterion reference component that was summative in nature. That's why the through year is the test rate instead of just the map growth. We get 2 separate reports in the spring.
So to clarify, if someone is in 4th grade and is reading at a 1st grade level and continues and gets to a 2nd grade level, but doesn't get there, that bank of 30 questions might be
Out of the water for them.
out of the water for them, and then they will get a not proficient.
Yep, I'm gonna show you what that looks like. So, so this is just clarifying again. So that's where that meets federal peer review requirements is that summative component, okay? So then as a result, we get 2 scale scores, a writ score in the spring and a scaled score. And then scaled score is based on this, right? This is something you've seen. At state expectations is meets. We see that all the time in our world. Above is exceeds, below is partially meets, well below is does not meet, right? They just have very specific language. They have this little rubric. And then I'll show you sort of how that plays out. So a family report for the spring, the fall family report looks different because there's only 1 type of data. Is just, this is the top part here, the bottom part of the first page, what's on the screen. So I handed you a page, our families have not received this yet, and this is redacted, so you have no idea who this kid is, okay? But this happens to be a grade 6 example, all the way through the slide deck. So the family will get a 1-pager, double-sided, hopefully electronically, not printed, but we'll see. And it's like, what's the report? What is this assessment? Why is my child taking it? And then an exorbitant amount of space on the 4 levels.
Yeah.
Okay, to make sure people, I guess they're required to define those 4 levels. That's fine. And then below that, which is what's on the screen, overall student performance. So for the summative part of the assessment, there is a 4-digit scaled score. The 4 digits themselves, like just to be 4 digits, means nothing, but the writ score is 3 digits. So they wanted to create a score, a scaled score that didn't compare to the writ score. They're completely separate numbers. So they made sure the scaled score had like a different configuration, which happens to be 4. So they just like randomly picked in the thousands, and it's not the writ score plus 1,000. Okay, it's a totally different beast.
But is that more like an SAT score? Isn't the SAT score like a round number, 4 digits?
Yeah, but I think that's where it gets to the
Gotcha.
statistics piece.
Yeah. No worries, we're not there yet,
Okay,
we're good.
so every student will have a report like this, and they'll have a reading score and a math score, assuming they took both tests like they should. And there's 4 categories, and you can see, I forgot why the green and yellow are so small and the blue and orange are so big. I can't answer that part, but there's 4 levels, they're color coded, and you can see the little circle where the child did well, and then the little bars that basically say if the student was to take this test again around the same time based on a standard error, they would probably answer within this range. So that's what that means. So this student is currently at state expectations for the summative part of the test.
For those one below, one above.
One below,
question.
one above questions. So this is criterion referenced and as it relates to grade level standards in Maine.
Got it. So not just our district.
These numbers that are on there, every student and parent is gonna get
Yeah.
a sheet like that, right?
Yeah.
Will those numbers cause anxiety or questions that maybe you don't need to have?
Maybe, but I have no idea because we've never done this before.
Okay.
So the range is 14 to 1,600 for every single kid.
Okay,
If kids show up in orange and yellow, it could. We've always sent family reports home. They, instead of a bar like this, they have this little
Like a
zigzag
graph.
chart graph,
Yeah.
a line
Yeah.
graph.
this is
Yeah.
very clear, I mean,
Yeah,
it's nice.
It's a good visual indication and the number just happens to be there, to your point, like, just
Yeah.
happens to be a number.
I think it probably depends on the family.
I got a kind of a funny question. Has anyone, a teacher ever taken one of these tests? Just to see if.
We're not allowed to take the test, but we can look over their shoulders. We're
No, I
not
mean,
allowed to
and tell-
screenshot. We're
To just
not.
test the teachers to see,
Yeah, we're,
it's like the canary.
I think that's an interesting
we can take,
concept, because in New York, they had the Regents test. And so you could take back Regents tests. And I would be very curious to see not only the teachers, but even the parents, you
yeah,
know? So they.
That'd be fun.
Right? But because, you know, if the parents were at
Yeah,
the expectation or exceeds and their kid was getting close, I think the anxiety level would really go down because it's a one-shot thing. You're taking the test, you probably have anxiety to begin with. And I like the range because you could have a range that starts in orange but goes to yellow.
correct.
And it's like, okay, we're moving forward, it's not that big a deal, and it's a very short window between 1481 and 1525.
Correct.
So that's kind of like, this is the sweet spot, if we can get into that area, we know that you're gonna make it.
Yeah,
Whereas if you're down at 1420.
it's a lot of learning that
work.
needs to
It's,
happen.
it's a
Yeah.
big problem.
So, there are some sample practice tests, but they don't give you the score.
I'm just wondering, for the fun of it, actually, if a teacher took it.
It's come up before, because it's a state exam, it would be up to the state to set those conditions.
That'd be fun. Yeah.
So I just wanna get your head around that this is against the state standards because the next score is different,
right.
which is what we're used to seeing, the next score. This child is currently what we consider proficient based on the performance against the state standards on this test at this point in time.
Do you submit that or does the state then submit that to the federal government? for that
The
request?
federal government kind of grabs all of the data
Okay,
and creates a state level
Its
report,
own,
not
okay.
individual student reports.
gotcha.
Yeah.
Very good, thank you.
Individual student reports don't live and
Yeah, they
even at the state
cumulative.
level.
Okay,
Yeah,
gotcha.
just at our level.
Yeah.
So this is the fun part, if you turn the page over.
Yep.
The same thing right now is a little bit more clear, right? So here is reading the same exact thing we just saw. And now the family will be able to see, okay, the student is 1516. The school average score is 1504 in grade 6, because that's 160 students last year in grade 6 that took this exam. And the district score is gonna be the same because we only have one 6th grade
Yeah, right.
unit. We don't, so in the elementary level, we have 3 3rd grade units. So the district score could look different than the school score. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay, but in middle school and high school, the
It's
district score
one
and school
and the
score
same.
will always be the same.
Yeah,
Then you can look at the state average score. So all of the 12,000 6th graders that took this exam last spring, the average was 1506, this 06, this student was 1516. So this student is above the school average and above the state average. Okay, make sense?
Yep.
Okay, then we get into that RIT score stuff. So the test is divided in reading, literary, well, it's a little different by grade level. This is 6th grade. Literary text, informational text, vocabulary, it'll describe what that means to the parent and it will give them a 3-point score. 3-digit score. What's interesting here is in this report, unless the report changes, because I haven't published them yet, I've just pulled one down. it doesn't give them any information about what that means against a RIT score
Right.
on this particular report, which I'll show you another example. So you can see what that really means. So the parent's gonna look at this and be like, okay, at state expectations, and then those are 3 digits that mean nothing to me, but these are the areas they were assessed in. So at least they understand what areas they were assessed in.
And they might know the 3 digits from the
They
other
might
words.
know the 3 digits from the past, but they might not.
Yeah.
Is there any place on there that tells them what the range of the digits are?
No, because that doesn't really work in the RIT world easily, but it does in the teacher report, so that's what I'm gonna show you.
Oh, gotcha.
So as soon as I can figure out why this isn't moving. There we go. So what does the RIT score mean? So if I look at the school report or the teacher report or the student report, we actually see, if I go back one, she said at 217, 218, 224. Then you get kind of an basically it's not exactly an average, I don't know what the calculation is, but it's the overall score, RIT score is a 219 in reading or literacy. And then this is the norm referenced part.
Mm.
That child is actually in yellow when compared to students nationally at their grade level.
Mm.
So in the state report, the child is proficient. In the national report, they're actually right on the cusp if you look. They're like just almost proficient. So that's where I think the confusion's gonna end up.
Yeah, I
The
agree.
teachers are seeing this and the scaled score, but honestly, the scaled score doesn't mean much to teachers. The scaled score really means something to the parents and it means something to the board because of the way I'll have to compare us to other districts and communities. We're gonna do that against the scaled score. In those lovely newspaper articles, all that sort of stuff,
All the
right?
data, yeah.
So, and the RIT score is really where the heart of our instructional decision-making is, except there are a couple of new features under the scaled score that now will help us with instructional decision-making, which is new and we're grateful for. And then the reason having those RIT scores is important under each strand, literary, informational, and vocabulary, because I can look at this child and say, oh, their vocabulary score is actually pretty solid. And if there's an area of growth for this student, it could, at this point in time, when the student took this assessment, without any other data in front of us, it could be the literary strand that we'd really want to help develop for that student. That's just one way to look at it.
Mhm.
So this, how does this help teachers? So the RIT score, we know, we're used to it, we know how it works, we've been using it for 18 years, we get it. I'm gonna try to make this faster. In the state now, through NUIA, we have this thing called the Achievement Level Explorer tool. And you see how there's an orange box that's cut off, a yellow box and a green box? Imagine a blue box. So it takes the standard, you can't really read the standard here and that's okay. The first line is the descriptor and then it takes the standard, this one's geometry. And it says, the standard is understand that shapes in different categories may share attributes, and that the shared attributes can define a larger category, and then it goes on and on. So for below, they determine rhombuses, rectangles, or squares out of other quadrilaterals. For at, they sort rhombuses, rectangles, and squares out of other quadrilaterals based on their shared attributes and something else. So basically what happens is it says, using this standard across the board, all 4 levels, if a student is falling in below, they can do these things. If a student's falling in at, they can do these things.
Mm.
And if they're not there, they can only do these things. And if they're exceeding, they can do these things. And so then we can be like, oh, we can look for trends and say, this is the gap we're experiencing. And it's more clarity than we've probably ever had on a state assessment. So that's helpful. And the teacher gets a report, and I cut the kid's name off on purpose. Under the 4 categories, this one, or 3 categories, this one's literary text. It actually gives them a per question result,
Oh.
which
and-
we've never had before.
Wow.
So one of the questions is on that very specific standard, and most of our teachers know the codes, RL61AB. I can't tell you what that is right now, but you can actually if it's hyperlinked, which is not because it's a slide deck, you can click on that and it will hover up and it will read the standard. It'll show the standard. So if you don't remember what those codes are, the teacher can click and it'll show it. Then it will say, well, this child answered the answer incorrectly. It was a single choice. They had to pick a single choice, and it was intended to be a hard question. But this child answered this standard correctly, and it was intended to be a medium question. So do you see how that kind of goes ups and downs? And so then what a teacher can do is kind of grab some students, and not grab students, but their data from below or just below or at or even exceed, and just like a sample set and say, are all of them answering the same standard incorrectly? If they're all across the board answering it incorrectly, we might actually have some work to do on that particular standard. Where does that fall in our scope and sequence? Did we get to it before this assessment or not? Have they had a history with it or not? Are they answering all the easy questions, but they're really struggling on the hard questions? Are they answering all the multiple choice questions correctly?
Right.
But there's a bunch of different types. Another type of question incorrectly. Oh, well, then we can actually teach response types, right? So do you see how the pattern of data that's available to them is really different than we're used to seeing? So that's another way this can help teachers.
Nice.
And then very quickly, what's next? So the fall data set will be available at this broad organizational level on December 6th. So I'm hoping to share. I'm just giving you a very quick embargoed snapshot. So I took away the school and the grade level because I'm not really supposed to share that yet with you based on state rules. So you have no idea where this is. But in one of our spaces, this is the school level on, I don't even know which test, let's say reading. And across the school, in this grade, 160 students took the test. In the scaled score, their median, which is like their mid score, right? Median
Yep.
average is 1504. And so as a collective unit of students, they're generally proficient. And then, but if you look on the RIT score,
Right.
as a collective group of students compared to the nation,
They're below.
they're below, well below standards.
Yeah.
Really interesting, huh?
Weird.
Yep,
Huh.
it's a
So
dilemma.
strange.
We gotta figure it out. But then you look at the profile and you see that big green bar, those are the students considered proficient. And I can actually click on that green bar and it will list all the students.
List them
Oh,
all.
that's so
Or the blue
cool.
bar, I can list it and so on. And then I can look at their individual RIT scores too.
Yep, so you can
So
dig
that's
in.
kind of interesting. So that's
Yeah.
coming.
Okay.
And then the other thing coming is what we call the demographic report, which is new to us, but not new to accountability reporting. And so again, this is a random group of students somewhere in our district, because I cut out all that identifiable information. And it will take that group of students and help us see how, like, males versus females. And the line, the black line is our school average.
Average, yeah.
So the females outperform the males a little bit. And this is why you're not knowing who this is.
Yeah.
Because really, if we have fewer than 10 students in a specific demographic group, this box that is now showing maybe
Oh, it won't
15,
tell you how
17
many.
will be blank,
Yep.
Yeah. that's
okay?
good.
Because
If you're
it's
Asian, you just
because
have
you
two
could,
dots.
you could identify,
Right,
right?
right.
So, right now I happen to see, like, actually collectively, one demographic group is below the school average and these other demographic groups are above the school average,
Mhm.
or at it. And then, like, they'll also report by special education population, economic disadvantaged population, multilingual, but it's interesting. Some of these got the dots and some of them didn't. And I know that's why they're cleaning up the data, right? Because some others should be getting some dots. So those kinds of reports will be available, which will help you understand why our schools we have a school at tier 3, right? And 2 schools at tier 1 right now under the accountability system.
Right.
And we've talked a lot about that last year.
Mm.
And they're in a holding pattern until this data is analyzed by the state as to if they're gonna actually activate on that or not. And
It's
so,
interesting, based on what I'm seeing there, because usually the Caucasian, the white students are doing better than the Hispanic students.
Yep, we have a different profile here. So that's coming, and then we'll analyze these results against our district goals and refine our action plans. I will provide you a report, in December about the actual data sets. We'll provide a fuller report or a complete comprehensive report to the board in January, and that's it.
That's
Do
plenty.
you feel oriented?
I always do when I come to these meetings, right, everyone?
You can hold on to this, cause there's no way I
You can't see it,
professionally
yeah.
redacted it,
Good
so there's no
job.
way to see
Yep.
it.
Yeah.
Do you have questions you'd like me to integrate into December's data report? That I should take into account?
Not yet, is my answer.
I was gonna say, it might be nice to know, if this is all that's, you know what I mean, like, if there are other ways for parents to know how to understand this content, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Because obviously I see this in my kids' report cards, these kinds of things, but like, I definitely have a totally different understanding of it now. I mean, I'm not saying I didn't you know what I mean? Like, being able to really look at it and use this information as a parent, instead of just being like, okay, they're doing okay in school, you know what I mean? Be like, oh, these are the kinds of things maybe we need to do more homework or whatever.
Yeah, like our iReady diagnostic actually provides a little
Right,
more
right,
information
yeah, it
like
does.
that, and this one doesn't seem to in the family report.
Right,
Which is why parent-teacher conferences are really important.
Mhm.
yes.
And the timing of this is tricky, because I would have liked to send the spring and the fall results home together. They're federally required to be sent home, and we do it anyway. With the report cards that are going out in December, but I don't think the fall reports will be technically available to us till after we send report cards
Yeah.
home.
I think even just making
So,
sure
they'll
that
go out
parents know
separately.
that this meeting is online, I think it's
Yeah.
really, you explained it all really well.
Well, and we've asked the state for some additional communication tools.
Right.
Because we're all making sense of this at the same time.
Mhm.
And they may be able to produce that, but we've also thought about locally, can we make like a 1 or 2 minute video? I mean, this was 30 minutes, so that's not gonna work.
No, I
But
think you could.
something short that just kind of says, these are the two different scales and why.
Yeah, I think you can do that. I
My
think we could,
question would be, is all of this testing, this particular type of testing, useful? That you get feedback from the teachers themselves? Is this a good thing, or is it a waste of our time, or does it deliver too much information or too little? Or the right kind? I mean, do you get that kind of feedback from
Yes.
teachers?
It's a mixed bag.
Yeah.
No one wants to lose their instructional time.
And it's required, so it's
And
a
it's
little bit of that.
required, so
Yeah.
it's a little frustrating, I'm sure. Well, and honestly, they don't actually know how to interpret all this yet either, because I'm figuring it out, and then the principals are figuring it out, and then we're all trying to figure out how to talk with teachers, to make sure that it's productive and useful.
Yeah, that's.
And then I think some groups are gonna be like, oh yeah, this is great. For nuggets, as long as it's not like all
The only
consuming.
thing, yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
And then there'll be some people that's like, I already knew that because I work with my kids so closely.
Yeah.
Why do I need to test to tell me that? And so there's that like back and forth piece.
Is there a mechanism for that, like, to get the feedback directly from the teachers?
They're pretty open and vocal and.
They'll reach out positive or negative when they feel
I'm just,
passionate.
I'm in enough meetings and the principals are in enough meetings with them, talking through the data and teaching them how to do the data, that I feel like, the other issue is like, how much control do any of us have over that? Like, I'm not allowed to not run this test.
Cause this is a state
Right,
requirement.
right, they're required.
And it's,
Deal.
you know
The
how it
state needs the
works.
feedback too. If
Right,
if they're doing something stupid, they should be told.
it's a federal requirement, so
Right.
it,
You can't deal with federal people. They are.
right, so I think what the state's trying to do is use an assessment, which was the NUIA map growth, that many districts in our state were already using because it's adaptive nature, it's informative, it's timely.
Yeah,
And there was a great value in that. The frustration lies, and now there's another layer to it that we have to learn, right? And there's this discrepancy in norm reference versus criterion reference and trying to get our heads wrapped around that we don't know yet if that's like bad, good, or neutral.
Right,
I mean, it's informative. That's as far as I can land on it right now. And the state has changed the assessment almost every year I've been here, right? And so there's that. And so for when I'm required to share with you, what is our trend in data? I often end up sharing with you like the NUIA map growth data and the iReady data because it's stable and we've always used it. And yet the newspapers and, because that's their job, is reporting the state level data accountability stuff, which is
from
your
one
state
data
test.
set, yeah.
And so I have to kind of walk that line,
Yeah.
making sure you're not surprised, you have all the information you need to have, you're aware where we're sitting as a district. And if you really want trends and growth and understanding, we need to use this data set over here until this state test becomes a constant. And it just hasn't been. I mean, we were the high school, we were the SAT, then the NUIA, now the NUIA through year at the grades 3 through 8. I don't even remember what it was.
I can't remember.
There was another name for it.
Yeah.
And then in the meantime, they also switched to science assessment. And then they moved to NUIA and then they went to NUIA through year. And so it's in 1 year, we actually had off because of COVID.
We made up for it, we took double last year.
We did, yeah. So
Yeah,
Well,
it's a really good question, Jeff, but I also think some of it's like, if teachers get to choose to take the test and use the information, you're going to get a different response than if teachers are required to give up their instructional time for a test that they may or may not use the information on. We try to always use the information to inform us and look at it in different ways.
as best as you can answer, I think.
I'm new to the game, I'm trying to figure it out.
It's a good question.
Yeah.
It's a really good question. Anything else?
And I'll be curious to see if they actually ever fill the gap of what they're trying to look at from Maine to the national, right? What does that mean? Is there some other agenda there? But we won't know that, these changes and.
Yeah, and I mean, I do have, you're welcome to be thinking about questions that I can respond in public at the next meeting. I have this, I don't know how many pages, 15, 16 pages, Q&A about scoring and reporting that I've really been working hard at trying to make sure I understand, so that if there's more detailed questions about how these scores are generated, I'm actually informed and can talk about it. I'm still a newbie.
Yep.
But I'm trying really hard.
The core curriculum standards are the same throughout the whole country, right? Because everybody has to.
Welcome to Maine. No, not everyone has to do anything in Maine. We are a local controlled state. We are, our literacy all of our standards are the Maine learning results. They are the Maine learning results. They go through a 5-year review cycle at the state. And the literacy standards might be comparable to the Common Core standards, but they're organized under its own organizational design. And there are some nuances that are different than the Common Core. That is also true with math and also true with science for next gen.
And I think last time I was at a meeting, you were talking about having curriculum written in more colloquial English for parents so that they knew what their kids were supposed to be learning over the course of the
Yes, we have
year.
some documentation at the K-5 level publicly. We have better documentation coming. We're doing these things now called curriculum storyboards because they are much more consumer friendly and get all of the information. And I have curriculum storyboards for most content areas and most grade levels, K to 8. And we're working at the high school level. And they're not published yet. But we put that on an agenda and talk about it if you want. Okay.
We're running a little over, but
Yep.
thank you for staying. Think of other questions to Angela's point, and if you need any of these data points, I'm sure she'll share them when she can. Right, the guides and stuff.
Oh, yeah. I'll
They're
share
already
anything.
online, I'm sure, right? Or do they give you any training?
I mean, you can find all this stuff
I
online.
figured
It's
you
not
could.
private.
That's
It's on
what
the
I
Maine
figured.
Department of Ed
Yeah.
website. I have access to it. You have access to
Yeah.
it. Anyone can have access to it. Yeah.
All right, we're good. 4:49? And it's dark out.
Yeah, sorry, it's
Yeah.
ran late.
No, thank you for that. That's helpful.
Trying really hard to keep it in the 1 hour
I
time
know,
slot.
but there's a lot to get through.
Sometimes I don't know how you keep your finger on.
Same for futures.
Yeah, I was gonna say, right. Well, welcome. Good to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
You'll officially be on then, what month are we in?
December 7th.
Thank you, I was gonna say, what month are we in?
I know, I don't
December
know
board
either. What
meeting?
day is it? What month is it? Yeah, I know.
Yes, we have our next meeting, if I get my minutes done early enough, it'll be on that too. Is
I
is that the
think,
second Tuesday?
I think it is. I was just in my calendar doing the same thing, like I better put it in now, right?
Yep, the
December
12th at
12th.
3:30.
Yep.
I'm gonna be running over from the middle school, so Terry will set us up and I'll, Jump
December
right in.
12th at 3:30.
and that will be, I'll talk with Alyssa, but we're gonna need to move forward a couple policies. And I know you guys are trying to move into other things, but, and, actually, we have a lot in that meeting, so we're gonna have to make some decisions.
Okay.
Or stretch the time. I
Or
don't
do it
know.
longer. Gotcha. Okay.
A couple policies, 2 programs from the high school to review and data.
Mm-hmm,
So we either push something later,
mm-hmm.
or probably extend it a little bit, because I can't imagine getting through all that in 1 hour.
Right, I'd agree. Okay.
So I'll let you think that through and then I can
Okay.
talk.
You know my random emails.
Helpful.
Point of consciousness, and I just email her, what about this?
Yeah, we've got to look at the class size policy and what's the other one?
Can't wait to see my
I'm
kids.
drawing
essay.
blank, drawing blank on the other one.
Well, I mean, we
forward to
got
it.
the, did you get the
Pat might
other
have
ones?
mentioned
My
it, but it's
kids'
slipped
teachers
me
gave them the
too, so-
written
Yeah.
scores.
Writing center
wait.
proposal,
Not-
Go
Yes.
away from
credit recovery
teacher
and program.
conferences with any.
We got like, we looked at them
Good stuff.
and even saw them
It's
sort
actually
of
really
ranked in the
interesting. I think
class.
I think people will have a lot to say
Yeah.
about it.
What school?
Awesome.
Have a good night. Are you
Yeah.
here for, you're not in
Yeah.
finance, are you?
But
I'm not
kids in
fine.
third grade.
No, didn't do
She
it.
covered all the other students and then.
Oh, you know
showed-
what though? I didn't get to go to Hana's. My
Oh,
husband went to
gotcha.
Hana's.
We just
Oh
did
my gosh.
Lewis's this week. We did the
That
high school
clock's wrong,
before we
right?
opened, so
It
we
is,
already
yeah.
had hers.
Now we're
Yeah.
I
And
have to like
she's
bring my
old enough
kid
to
to
know what her
hockey and I was
score
like,
is
oh,